Going to give them just a minute on that side, but we're about to call the meeting to order. About ready? Can you give us roll call, please?
Commissioners being held Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. and attendance are Chairperson Emma Byrd, Vice Chair Mitchell Wills, Commissioner Emery Howard, Commissioner Raymond Iglesias, Commissioner Carson Turner, County Attorney Matt Rollerson, County Administrator Jennifer Davis, and Deputy Clerk Sharon Congleton.
Thank you. Welcome to our workshop on today. We appreciate everyone that was able to come out. At this time, this is concerning the Henry County Land Use Workshop, and we're going to turn it over to, I guess, Ryan at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, Ryan Alexander, Associate County Planner. All right. Thanks for everybody being here today. We've been working through this future land use update now. Before I even started last year, I'm coming up on a year now, so it's been going on for probably about 2 years. And we finished up our public meetings. We're about to take it to the LPA, then back to you guys. But I wanted to talk through the changes that we proposed and then go through the map and just make sure everybody understood where we were at and what the proposed changes are. And so I provided a packet for everybody. And within that packet, I had, it's just a little paper on FAR, floor area ratio. It comes up a lot within this comprehensive plan, so I wanted to give that to everybody so they had it, so they understood what that is and how it's calculated. There's also some LDC amendments that are in there, and that is not a complete list by any means. Those are just the ones we've identified so far that we'll be having to change as we're going through with this. I also included the current future land use map and also some of the older future land use maps so you can see how we've changed it, and then the newest maps in that packet as well. And we only have an hour, so I provided a sheet for notes. If you have questions, please ask them, but if you can, just write them down, and I have my email there, my phone number. We can follow up before we get back to the LPA and come back to you guys to talk through any issues or concerns that you might have as we're moving through the process. All right. I also have Jeremy Franz here with RVI Planning, and he's been working with me throughout this process. And Jeremy, I had the board and the county administrator, we have a certificate I wanted to give you. You have taken a lot of time, and everybody that's been to the meetings has seen him give a presentation and after hours and working with us, and I just appreciate that. And his contact's on there as well. Feel free to reach out to him. He is incredibly knowledgeable about planning. I've relied on him heavily throughout this process. All right, so our meeting today, we're going to go through the existing conditions, the assessment that we did. This was all prior to me getting here, but we'll go through that. We'll talk through the future land use element changes, and then as well as the map changes, and then our schedule. So the countywide takeaways, this was all done. We had a survey, we had some public meetings, and in all that analysis, we had a couple of things that we wanted to highlight. There was very little allocation for higher density housing. And one of those things that we were noticing is that we're having this sprawling single family homes throughout the county, and we don't have a lot of diverse housing or affordable housing opportunities. So we wanted to increase that, and that was one of the things that we had as a takeaway. There also was limited allocation for commercial and industrial uses. Hendry County is somewhat of a bedroom community in that people live here, but they work in Lee County. So we wanted to provide more economic opportunities and job creation throughout the county. Agricultural categories were very broad, and you'll see how we broke those down as we get into it. There were minimal limitations on intensive agricultural uses. And again, as the county continues to grow and we have these larger urban areas and residential areas, we want to make sure that we're protecting them and also protecting our agricultural uses that are essential to the county. The last thing that we noticed was we wanted to work on some growth principles and work on some balanced development patterns. And you'll see that as we go through to try to unify some of these categories, we combined some, we moved some around and made it work so it's a little bit more of a balanced plan and it makes sense. So we followed up with our surveys and all of our analysis with our public outreach meetings. We had 5 public outreach meetings. The first one was in Felda, and then we had our last one out in Harlem. There were a couple of things that we had that we took away from that as well. State Road 80 and 27, State Road 80, 27, and also State Road 29, people wanted to see it develop with an attractive non-residential uses. And in doing this, you can see on the LDC amendments that we're working on updating the gateway overlay and then also possibly expanding that across the State Road 29 corridor as well. The density and intensity increases, people were concerned that it would impact their taxes, and that's something we're working on as a county as we're working our impact fee study right now. We'll hopefully alleviate some of that. One of the big things was maintaining the rural character of our agricultural and rural communities. You'll see how we have moved some things around and made it work to try to protect some of our existing communities and also our agricultural communities. Another takeaway was balancing property rights with the needs for safeguards from intensive agricultural uses, and just finding those transitional areas and making sure that as we're having this growth with the population, that we're balancing that with the intensive agricultural uses again. Accommodate higher intensity non-residential land uses around Everglades, and part of that will be working on a follow-on comp plan amendment that we're working to update our transportation element with some studies that have been done for Everglades. And then finally, examine the open space requirements, particularly for industrial projects. And we have readdressed that even right before we sent it to the state. We went back through our open space requirements to make sure they weren't excessive and that they made sense.
So can I ask you on that?
Yeah.
So that's the one that Tommy Perry brought up at the Harlem meeting, right? So I think at that point you had, is it 30%? And that you had thought that previously that a number should have been lower. So where did you end up with?
Yeah, so for the most part, we took everything back to what it was, and in some cases reduced it. He was talking about the industrial specifically.
Right.
So we had taken it up to our open space requirement, we had increased it to 30, and we took it back to 15, so it's no change from what it is right now.
Okay.
It's back to 15. All right, so those were our takeaways. All right, so getting into the future land use element changes. These are the countywide changes, and then we'll get into each one individually. So we're assigning urban, suburban, and rural land classifications to each future land use category. That allows us to direct the growth and have some of those higher intensity areas within urban areas, have that suburban as it's transitioning out into our rural areas, then having those rural agricultural areas and large lot subdivisions and things like that that we have that are already in the county. We took away our references to central water and sewer. They're dictated by state statutes anyways. It was redundant, so we took out those references. We also listed implementing zoning districts, and this is really just to allow a quick reference for anybody looking in the comp plan. And that was another thing that I had a comment come back, and we'll be adding a table of contents as well, so that way people can look at it and be able to reference and find what they need to get to quickly. We added some smart growth principles, especially as we re-examined some of our overlays to make sure that the growth and the timing and the location of these new developments were in line with how we're growing our infrastructure as a county. We also added resiliency principles. Those are in the last pages of the proposed changes that I provided you guys. All right. So getting into the future land use categories. The residential future land use categories, we had residential rural estates. We renamed that to rural community and combined that rural estates category with our residential low density. There was a lot of overlap and the intent was similar, so we were able to combine those. We didn't increase the maximum density, it's still 1 dwelling unit per acre, but we did add some non-residential unit uses, and that's where we go back to that floor area ratio. Those non-residential uses are restricted to neighborhood and convenience commercial, like a Dollar General or something like that, out in those rural areas just to provide some convenience to the residents. So residential low density went into that rural community. And then medium density, we renamed to our suburban mixed uses. We have a density of 2 units per acre, and that can be increased. There are a couple of criteria that must be met. It has to have direct access to a local collector or arterial road, proximate to public services, and the only way to get that increasingly dense is to rezone through a planned unit development. That planned unit development offers flexibility and a little bit more ability for the developer to have those mixed uses and integrate them in with each other. So that's the purpose behind that. The high density residential, we renamed to urban mixed use and allowed that density increase to 6 dwelling units per acre to a maximum of 15 dwelling units per acre. And that's to ensure that we don't have those sprawling uses within those areas, that we really want that higher density housing. There is commercial allowed within those areas as well. And then we worked with Harlem and we found there were some specific needs within the Harlem community. So you'll see as we get into our maps, the Harlem community was redesignated to urban mixed use, and we have some specific allowances within the comp plan for Harlem to allow those commercial uses and integrating them in some of those smaller lots with residential uses.
What would be a barrier, and you can speak to either suburban mixed use or urban mixed use, to, let me ask the question differently. You have suburban mixed use, density of 2 dwelling units per acre, can be increased to 4 if conditions are met, but you only spoke to arterial roads, access, and something else.
Proximate to public services, and it has to be done through a planned unit development.
Public services being?
Water, sewer, public services. I can break that down a little bit more, and that is.
Nope, you kind of drilled in on it. So we are taking into consideration, and I just think, Ryan, I would love for that to be spelled out a little bit more so that the constituency is starting to grasp how important it is that we bring water and sewer to our outlying areas to increase our density, Right. I mean, you take Harlem, for example. In my opinion, and Ms. Bird, I'd love to know your opinion of this. You take Front Street. Front Street is prime for somebody to do, on one of the lots that is there, to go vertical with a 4 or 5 story unit, apartment complex.
That was one of the conversations that we had, along with a business at the bottom and apartments at the top.
Yes, ma'am,
So that's one of the discussions that we had at the meeting. And the first thing was to try to get it cleaned up, so that's where we're at right now.
And I think if a developer is coming in and they see that and they know the volume of renters that are looking, right, and the footprint was there, but now they can tie into city sewer and water, that's a game changer, Ryan, And I would just like for that to be spelled out so that if there are local entities looking to do that, what Beck did on WCO, that can't happen in many places in Hendry County. A person, I don't care how many deep your pockets are, they couldn't put how many apartments is that, Raymond, off the hand?
Not sure.
It's over 40 units, isn't it?
No.
Is it 20?
I'm going to say more like 15 maybe.
Okay, but today, Ryan, you could not go to Montura, buy X number of acres, and go vertical with 15 apartments simply because our sewer and water capacity isn't there. Is that an accurate statement or inaccurate?
It's accurate.
Accurate.
They would have to provide it
Yes,
in
sir.
some way.
Yep. Go even closer. Go to Hooker's Point. And if you wanted to do that, you couldn't do it. You have to do single family dwellings, or something along those lines. And I just think that's I think that's a major factor that holds us back a lot of times on seeing some of the densities that we would like to see. So an increase, reducing the footprint, keeping our rural feel, but having people clustered on top of each other.
Okay.
The thing to keep in mind as well, when we start going vertical, it's going to affect our fire departments.
Absolutely.
It's going to affect the needs they have for ladder trucks and other apparatuses to take care of those facilities. And what you just said a while ago is something I've heard quite a bit over the last 6 or 7 years when I've sat in the meetings in either Fort Myers or whatever the case may be. When they discuss these new developments, what they do is they have them do the build out of the water and the sewer. They build them to specs, which would be the municipality specs, and at the end of the project is turned over to the municipalities for control of that site. So that's keep that in mind as well.
Yeah,
You're right. There's a lot of property that we have. Beck's doing a lot in downtown LaBelle. I don't know if y'all have seen that or not. They're doing quite a few apartment buildings there, 2 and 3 story, and they're going up with them. And
Yeah.
they look nice. They're nice properties.
Yeah, yeah,
A lot of pushback, of course, because it's downtown LaBelle, but
yeah.
same thing. Water and sewer right now, they're actually working in that area to get water and sewer, so
Yeah.
same problem.
And I know they might not understand, but the only way is up. There's no other place to go but up, so. Thank you.
Commissioner, just to be clear then, so defining that proximate to public services and what that means.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
but Ryan, making it spelled out so that the lay person, as they're perusing this, they see, because public services so many times gets tied into EMS, sheriff's department. You know, it doesn't roll back to what you said, and it was the first 2 or 3 items that you touched on. And so, you know, I could see someone wanting to be critical of an effort here, and it's not what you meant at all.
Okay.
You were correct in it, but you're almost jargon laced with, you know, the inside information that you have. So just spell it out a little bit easier.
And possibly change the verbiage there to public utilities
Yeah.
rather than services.
And it's just to keep them from speculating on what you're trying to say.
I have gone back through this, and especially for some of these terms that say suggested or proximate,
Yeah.
or and LaBelle's dealing with this right now with a project. Some of these encouraged or words like that, making them more definitive and spelling them out to where it shall have this, or proximate means this. It's within this much distance. So I'll look back into that and keep going into that. Thank you. All right. All right, so that was our residential future land uses, and we have one more in our residential pre-existing rural estates. We renamed this to rural legacy communities. These are our older communities, and as we get into the map, you can see them that are spelled out within our comp plan. It's no change to the maximum density, 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. Big Oak Acres is the only outlier there at 1 unit per 5 acres, and that's a development up on the northern county line over by Muse and up towards Glades County. There is a list within the category that has what these pre-existing rural estates are. It is closed to future map amendments. You can still have rural estates, but these pre-existing ones, these legacy communities, is closed to future map amendments. All right, multi-use development. We renamed this to mixed-use centers, classified it as suburban and urban, and increased our maximum densities. So a maximum density of 4 dwelling units for single-family detached to include modular homes, and then 12 dwelling units for other residential uses. That's duplexes, multifamily, something to that effect. It also allows recreational vehicle parks, and you'll see as we get into here, our leisure rec category was redundant. We've kind of wrapped that up within our mixed-use center to allow those RV parks as well within that category. The commercial future land use category, we added a couple things to it. We added research and development, and we also added the allowance for light industrial uses. So these are indoor uses that could be within a commercial future land use, just to expand some of those allowances within there. Now, we also allow for limited residential, but it has to be integrated. What we were just talking about with Harlem, having that integration where you have, your commercial with apartments on top or some kind of integration. That also allows them to increase the density and get some more use out of the property. And I'm sorry, going back to that FAR, it can be increased, and that increase is if they are connected to central water and sewer, and also if they integrate those commercial and residential uses, they can get a higher FAR as well. The industrial future land use category, we classified as suburban and urban. There are 2 tiers within this category. So our light industrial uses are tier 1, and they're permitted or through a special exception. And then the heavier industrial uses, those more intense uses, require a planned unit development. We also added commercial uses, but these are to serve the industrial development, like a deli or something like that within the industrial development, but that's the only commercial allowances within there. The agricultural future land use category, it used to be in 2 levels of uses. We had level 1 and level 2. We've broken those down a little bit more to have a little bit more flexibility. Then also, again, back to those principles that we were talking about beforehand, to protect those intensive agricultural uses and make sure we have those transitional spaces or that buffering that's appropriate. This is also part of an LDC amendment that'll be coming back for our agricultural worker camps and agricultural worker housing. So we have split those up just with some issues we've had in the county as we move forward with agricultural worker camps. So agricultural worker housing would be within the density allowed for A2 properties. It would include a farm hand, something like that, to where it's not a camp or something that's used for outside agricultural uses that are on that property, or they have a multifamily development or barracks or dorms or something to that effect, would be an agricultural worker camp, and that would trigger a PUD rezone to allow that use.
Gonna come in triggering a lot of areas right now. That's throughout the entire area we're in my district over there, so.
Yes, sir.
And the downtown city of LaBelle is dealing with it as well.
Yes, sir. And hopefully breaking that out and splitting up those categories. I found some other counties that have broken it up, and I think that allows for the agricultural workers that we understand we need, but also allows the county to address the concerns for those larger camps.
You don't have to worry about them looking. You already have some places initiated for them, so we don't run into the same problem we had a few months ago, so.
All right, so the leisure rec category, this is another one that we're closing the future land or future map amendments. We have allowed the uses within other categories. The RV parks, like I said, were within the mixed use categories. Any of the existing RV parks, Grandma's Grove, Palm and Pines, those are grandfathered in. They won't be changed, and their allowances are still the same. The public future land use category. Yes, sir.
Just from a planning perspective, do you view those as positive attributes or negative attributes to a county?
For the
Are they a drain on society, or do they support themselves?
the agriculture, are we back to agricultural workers or
Or the RV parks?
Oh, the RV parks. Oh, I'm not the person to ask that. I live in a camper, so it's. I think there's an appropriate place for them, and I think they are definitely a positive to the county. There's a lot of things they bring with them, especially with your seasonal residents that come in. They support downtown LaBelle. They support the restaurants in the area, things like that. I think there's a positive, but there's definitely that higher intensity of use, the other concerns that have to be addressed and make sure it's in the appropriate place. I think is the best.
Because I look at Okeechobee and how seasonal they are. And then if you look at an aerial and how many of the RV parks, and then sliding down to Glades County to Buckhead Ridge and all that, and what that brings to the bottom line, I think they're astronomical, you know. And I'm just, but there's a teetering balance, right? Like when you go into some of our older mobile home parks, if we haven't been able to keep our thumb on them, you know, then it becomes a situation where, you know, the price or the value of them deflates so greatly, you know, that it I think now has the ability to be upside down on a services versus dollars and cents towards what it renders. And so I just I've been really looking at that a lot lately throughout the state, especially. You know, I mean, you look at Martin County. I happen to be working in Hobe Sound right now, and you go right down the road on Bridge Road, go across Jupiter Island where Tiger Woods and Celine Dion have homes, right? It's kind of the definition of the 0.5% club, not the 1% club. But then you come right back across the bridge and you go down just 3 to 5 minutes, and there's 4 different RVs in Martin County, which has one of the lowest millages in the state of Florida of the 67 counties. And those parks, I'm telling you, they are a shot in the arm to even a county like Martin County, because you look at the volume of residents that are in there and what they're turning in, and you know, it's a happy medium. So anyway, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thank you, Ryan.
There is, when I was go back to the agricultural use too, when I was doing a lot of research for agricultural worker camps, some counties don't have problems with ag workers because they've taken over some of the RV parks. So that's a concern as well. And then you have the other dynamic where the seasonal, like you're saying, so there could be a downside to it.
Yeah.
But it's got to be in the right spot. You know, like in between Pahokee and Stewart out in the middle of nowhere, that's a whole different ballgame.
That's a different game, right?
All right, so, well, I think I skipped the public. All right, so for public, we have two different tiers within there. So the first tier is allowed as a permitted use, and those are lower intensity uses, and they're through permitted use or special exception. That tier 2 use, airport, solid waste and recycling facilities, things like that that are a little more intensive would require rezoning, and then we can look at the appropriateness. And let me highlight that so we can define appropriateness a little bit more. But we will have those tiers to delineate that and make sure we know what's what and what's allowed and what needs to go through a process before it's allowed. All right. So that is the end of the future land use elements. Within your packet, I provided the maps, and I just wanted to walk through them real quick because there are some significant changes, and in other places there's not. And with changing the names, it can get a little bit confusing. So we'll look at West Hendry first. One of the things that we looked at in West Hendry is we reduced that West Hendry planning overlay.
Could you go back to the first one, the overall? Do you have a pointer?
Yes, sir.
Could you just show us where the rural legacy communities are, please?
Oh, yep, that's it. All right, so our rural legacy communities,
Pioneer.
we're down, let me see here. So
Felda.
Pioneer, down in Felda, these light brown areas in Felda. We have a community up here, out here. There's a little bit right in this area, stretching down on Double J Acres right there, that little spot. Coming across the county, you have right up here.
Flaghole 7K.
Flaghole, yes, sir. And I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any. When we break down the maps, you'll be able to see it a little bit more clear. But there's one, I'm sorry, up there. That's what I talked about earlier with that Big Oak Acres. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
So for the West Hendry planning overlay, we changed the boundary. We cut out a couple of those existing communities and then reduced some. It went all the way down into the C43 reservoir, and we eliminated that, as well as making sure that it didn't impact our homes along the river and some of those existing rural communities, and then up into LaBelle as well, so they didn't have that allowance for those higher densities. It's really focused on those large areas, the agricultural area, and then the Fort Deneau Road area that has the potential for development to give them some of those additional categories. We also expanded the commercial category along the bottom of the south side of State Road 80. For some reason, it cut off about halfway, so we finished that and connected it all the way across to allow some of that commercial development that's already happening within that area. We actually just had a comp plan amendment for one of those properties. So it's bringing everything in line and making sure that it's a well-integrated use. The one thing that I noticed, and Commissioner Howard brought it up to me this morning, so this area over here, this is rural communities. We changed the color, but we didn't change the name. So it says suburban mixed use. That's not correct. It's actually our rural community going up into that area. And then you can have our suburban use, you can see as it's transitioning, and then we'll see on our next maps, as you're getting into 29, it goes up to higher intensity and just has that transitional area. And so this is what I was talking about, going into that suburban mixed use and then integrating into our commercial and industrial areas along State Road 29. There are a couple of things on this map that have recently been updated. So we fixed some of the properties down by the airport. Some of these properties are set aside for the airport, as well as setting aside some of our schools and the college as public. And then the old map, the special density for Port LaBelle was encompassing almost the entire map. We went ahead and pulled out some of these designated commercial areas within the Port LaBelle community that can support that community as it's continuing to grow, and have some of those commercial nodes in there that were in the original plans for the Port LaBelle community.
You took them out?
No, so we added them. We added them. Yes, sir.
So you added those pink blocks?
Yes, sir.
And when you say commercial nodes that are going to be in, like, can y'all help me understand exactly what you're thinking? Like, is this where you're talking about like a deli or?
Yes, sir. So some of these nodes have general commercial uses as well, though. So anything, a gym, a barber shop, things like that that would reduce trips into town are allowed within those nodes. They're 15 to 20 acres that are set aside in each of those little pink areas for that kind of a shopping center, something like that. Right now, it doesn't seem like it's viable, but we understand that Port LaBelle, once it's built out, will definitely support those commercial nodes. And some of them have changed. We have some duplexes in one of them now. And then I'm working with another developer that wants to do some self-storage out in one of them. So there's little things like that that would just benefit the Port LaBelle community and reduce trips into town. All right. I think that was that for that map. And then the same thing for Banyan Village. We called out those commercial areas in that community as well that were set aside in the original plans. So they're set aside as commercial as well.
How many acres, like just off the hand, how many acres is that larger pink block? One on the top.
I don't have the acreage for the larger one. That's owned by the school board, I believe.
Okay, I think that's, Arena, I want to say it's 20 acres?
I think so. You're also missing on the other side of that canal, the where that water tower is going to go, right off Sycamore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And am I missing something? Wasn't there public land set aside there as well in Banyan Village?
I think I think
This is commercial area.
the pink commercial, I think, is part of that.
That is part of
I
it?
think
Okay.
so, Commissioner.
This spot right in here was set aside. I'd have to go back to the plans. There's also higher density allowances right here. That's RG4. That is owned by CHL Homes, I believe. So there's a couple other things within there. I've just been digging into it, and that's what I had. But if you have other things, please let me know, or if you want to change some of them, just follow up with me.
Ryan, where do you live? Where are you from?
Well, I was
Where's
born-
your background? Where are you familiar with? Are you familiar with Fort Myers, Alva, West Palm? Where are you from?
Enterprise.
Enterprise, Alabama?
Enterprise.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. All right. So you know Troy very well.
Absolutely.
You know Dothan very well. Okay. When you come straight south of Birmingham and you go into the beautiful city of Prattville, Pratt Vegas, baby. All right. When you take that neighborhood, how many homes are there roughly? Just off the hip at build out, how many homes are there?
I don't have it broken down between Banyan and Port LaBelle. I don't know off the top of my head. It's a significant number, though.
But here's the nexus of my question. When you go to Wetumpka, right, and they have their first gated community that comes in adjacent to another place that's going to have 300 houses, is this prototypical, or do they force them to go all the way back? I'm going to Flying Cow Road over in Wellington, Raymond, in my head right now, okay? And I'm saying, all right, you're 10, 15 minutes off of 80, off of Southern Boulevard, back there. But I think in order for you to go to a self-storage place or to go to the 7-Eleven or the Shell station, you've got to do what we would have to do here, which is come out, go up Lexington or Wellington, and then go all the way back to the Shell station. Is this an effort to have another portion of that in this neighborhood? And is that normal, or do we want to drive them to those areas?
No, sir. You want to keep them within the community, just for those convenience commercial uses, not so much maybe for a Walmart or something in the community. But those smaller uses like a Dollar General or a gas station to reduce those overall trips going in and out on the county roads is the purpose behind that. Now, I will say, in going through them, they're pretty large chunks.
Yes, sir.
And so if we were going through the plan and somebody came with a proposal to reduce them with affordable housing or something, then we could definitely look at it as we got into it. But long term, I believe the communities will support at least some sort of commercial nodes within there, and that would be the intention.
And then as you see this, in your professional opinion, and Ms. Davis, I'd love for you to chime in, and then I'd like to hear y'all's opinion. Is it our responsibility to build a park out there? Is it, and I'm not asking, you know, jokingly,
There's,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
paid taxes for a lot of years. So it is our responsibility to build a park, and is it our responsibility then? Is our goal to upgrade Pioneer's response time? Or is this something where you have to have your firehouse, you know, where does it deem in? Because now for me, now you start running the math of, okay, you know, when does that threshold get tripped, Ms. Davis? When does that happen? And then, you know, what merits it?
there was,
I'm mad if I live in Flaghole right now, and Raymond, how many houses are out there right now?
And Banyan,
Yes, sir.
200
There's 200 houses right now. No,
park.
in construction.
in construction.
Some already built,
Okay,
some lay blocks, some have trusses. Yeah,
but
they're
in
in
the
the
next
process.
730 days, there'll be 200 homes out there.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
there's no doubt. More than that, probably.
over 3,000 lots.
Okay.
A little over 3,000
and
lots.
so now Henry County comes in, or that's actually, is that West Rec, by the way?
It is.
That is.
That's East Rec.
We took y'all kicked them out. I remember Don was so mad.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love him. So now the county comes in and puts in a sidewalk, puts in a park, does this, that, and the other for, let's say it's 400 homes. I'm irate. I'm irate if I live in Flaghole at that moment, because if I want to recreate in Flaghole, I got to go all the way to Montour, or I got to go all the way to Clewiston. And you say, okay, well, what's the point you're making? I'm just saying, how do you start to marry that? I'm kind of mad if this is state of the art facilities, and I've been in Hooker's Point my whole life, and all I have is the end of Davison Park and Bo Pelham Park, which we put a nice little track around Bo Pelham, you know. So I'm just putting this out there to say, how do we get that list going as well, so that we have the ability for our constituents that have been underwriting us forever and a day to get their just what they've been supporting and underwriting us forever and a day before we pull the trigger on this. Now, if it's earmarked, if it is coming out of their MSBU or their MSTU, and it's going directly to them, that's a different discussion.
And that's, there was the bankruptcy. It was before all of our time.
Yes, ma'am.
And there was a certain amount of money that was deemed to be set aside that we still have, that we haven't ever used, and it's just been earning interest, for a park in Banyan Village specifically. Obviously, we haven't ever built it because there was nothing going on there.
It has to be for Banyan. It can't be units 1 through 9.
I believe it was Banyan, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, so we
Banyan, it
can
was
dig
written in
in
that
that.
agreement.
We need to look at that paperwork
Yeah.
and let you know, because I don't know what triggers it.
Yeah.
I don't know sitting here right now what triggers that. But that's different than, so the rest of Port LaBelle, we don't have anything like that. There's nothing for us to say, okay, we need to go put a park here or put a park there. It was specifically for Banyan.
Not to move the conversation backwards, but do y'all think that Port LaBelle, like, does Port LaBelle need to have a devoted in there, or do we need to just get on the pony and start doing what we said we were going to do up there on the one what's the road?
So that's a great
40.
point. So the reality is that I don't want to dump any money into a park either, but in my district, I don't have one park in any of my district, east or west of the county. Montura maintains their own through their own assessment. Clewiston, we don't have any land north of 27. And in Port LaBelle, units 1 through 13, I don't have one park.
Okay, so my retort to that would be, you have a ton of parks, they just don't happen to be in county ownership.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So my thought, can you go back to the slide that shows Port LaBelle? All right. You can't zoom in, can you?
Yes, sir, but I know
So
what you're-
on the, can you show the industrial, there you go, right there. So that's our somewhat industrial park. That's
Where
we,
our special districts is, right?
correct.
Yeah.
And we're going to expand. What are you going to put there, Shane, at some point? Hopefully, we're going to move Road and Bridge there, you know, somewhere down the line. And we're going to sell your property there on that prime location by that roundabout and do something. But anyway, my point is, if you look at where that property's
that's part
located at,
three.
it's
Part
dead
three.
center. It's dead center of units 1 through 9. My thought was to put something there, okay? With, I've had some preliminary conversations with, very brief conversations with U.S. Sugar. I like to reach out to FPL and maybe look and see what kind of park, I don't want something big, but something for that community because they are left out. Now, you could sit back and say, okay, but we've got 4A Park that we've been working on forever. You're right. But there's nothing within units 1 through 9. So just something that I've that kind of brainstormed the last few weeks.
Can you take your pointer right there and show me Forey from that? I'm
Forey-
almost
Forey is-
100%.
Is that the purple stripe line?
Forey abuts
Right.
Unit 1.
Right.
Right behind Unit 1, correct. Yeah, which will never have an access road. We made sure that.
Commissioner Turner, going back to what you said, are you saying that we might be leaving legacy communities behind?
I'm just
Let's
saying,
say-
I'm just saying, Commissioner, I don't want to penalize a community that has been, around forever and a day and has, minimal facilities to none, maybe. And we got the new bright shiny toy and we're gonna throw dollars and cents at it simply because.
But is there, do we have any county land in Flagler?
I don't think so. I knew that at one point and
Is there a way that even if it's not county land, that we still could establish a park there?
by the way, that's.
Just keeping
that's
it
not the
simple. It doesn't
genesis.
have to be
That's not the
something-
genesis
I
of
understand.
the conversation. I mean, my thing is I just love having an inventory and having a plan that we're following and moving forward on.
Like Bainbridge Village?
Yes, ma'am. And I mean, that's a great point too, that you bring up, Jennifer, with regards to that lawsuit. I remember reading about that now, actually. That was with the CHL, all of that, and how
It
was their
wasn't-
predecessor,
It
right?
was general development.
Yeah, GDC, General Development Corp.
One,
And so-
one good portion of this, when you have these larger developments come in those developments, there's green space, but there's also parks and recreation built into these projects.
Yeah.
And where you're talking about the projects not being there now, if you go back to the full county, you talk about Montour, well, the folks in Winter Estates pay a recreation tax, and their kids play in Lehigh.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing there at all, there's not even a road there yet, we're working on it. But going back, you look at these developments, Felda, they have one little park down there, it's a nice little park, but that's what they have, that's what they've paid taxes for years. Port LaBelle, the same thing, the only thing they really have is in Unit 4, which is an HOA, so not everyone can use it, but they have a pool, and they have a small park in it. But the whole key to this is, we gotta understand going forward, do we need to do better? Absolutely. But these areas that are, when they blow up in these situations, we're no different in Port LaBelle. You're talking about the stores in Port LaBelle. Well, that's an incredible idea that you thought ahead enough to actually incorporate the areas where they could put the strip malls and do things. People love that convenience. Everyone's convenient driven now. But the parks wise, we really got to start thinking about recreation in general throughout the entire county. Most of your districts do not have recreation.
But that's the thing, though. So, Commissioner Wills, that's why I love this conversation. You just triggered so many thoughts. So, when I was a young buck riding around on my bicycle with the herd of humans in Hooker's Point, we went and swam in a pool in tropical mobile home. No, excuse me, not tropical. In Twin Lakes trailer park.
Yep.
We swam in a pool there, and we went and played on a basketball court that no longer exists. Where Mr. Robinson and them live, where Faye lives, you drive right through that road right there, and that was the mecca of basketball courts for a lot of this area. I mean, I remember hooping with a lot of guys, and I'm horrible at basketball, by the way, but I remember playing with a lot of guys from everywhere. They would go out to Tropical Mobile Home Trailer Park, and we would play ball there. Mostly I was younger, so I watched people play basketball. But the point I'm making is that we had recreational opportunities, and none of those facilities were built by the county. Was that mandated in the county, or did Butch Reddish do that out of the wonderfulness of his heart, put that pool in and have recreation out there at Twin Lakes? And I'm going to say that Mr. Ridgel actually did do that. I'm going to say that Mr. Ridgel and Ms. Ridgel put that in because they said, you know what, we have a herd of humans that live out here, and they need to be able to have something, so we'll just take a few lots away and put basketball courts in and have this ability, and then we would sneak into the one that is owned by the Canadians now, and we get all kind of bad trouble in the pledge house. But the point I'm making is, Ryan, is we need to make sure that's built in to the process, because it's a long anecdote now, but I remember going to Tallahassee and getting chastised by members of DEP, by Department of Community Affairs when it existed. It was so weird, Ryan. Like, they looked at the aerial because we were talking about getting roads upgraded for Pioneer, and the fact that we can't pave anything in Pioneer because of the decree by South Florida Water Management District and sheet flow and all this stuff. Anyway, they looked at it and they were like, "Oh God, this just breaks my heart to see a development like this. I wish we could just go back in our time capsule and flip it." And I said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I said, you need to get Ariel, Florida. I said, because I can take you to Lehigh, Montura, and I said, I've only gone in a 40-mile circle. I said, it's all like that. So don't sit here and say, oh, we're so behind the times. All of that, Ryan, somebody comes in today and wants to put in, they own that and they want to put in it. Paul Bryan wants to put in a beautiful development. Are there requirements for green space and public facilities that are not going to be on the county's tax dollars? I'm pretty sure there is.
There is an extent, but I want to dive into a little bit more. I dove into the West Hendry planning overlay, but you're kind of going back to what you said before. Mr. Original might have done it out of the goodness of his heart. There's not a lot of developers that do things out of the goodness of their heart. And that's something I deal with constantly when people come in. They say, I want to build a development. And I say, well, what do you want to build? And they just say houses, 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 houses. They don't have a community center. They don't have a park, things like that. So I'm going to dig back into it. And I think that's something that Commissioner Iglesias brought up a couple times recently, to just make sure we have those recreational opportunities provided and required within here for those developments.
Scott Valley, Raymond's a prime example.
We had the opportunity to say what that is through the plan unit development process. So we had, I won't give a specific for a developer, but we had someone not long ago come and they wanted to put in a lot of homes on the north side of the river, remember? And there was no commercial or
Just
any,
homes.
it was just homes, and we were,
It was basically, Jennifer, not to cut you off, but it was, I want to make as much money as I possibly can on per square acre or per square foot going vertical.
Right.
What can I do?
Absolutely. Nobody,
Right?
they don't have a sense of community.
Give me the
and
strongest,
giving back.
give me the strongest density I can possibly make.
right.
But.
That's not a bad person, by the way.
Well, no, but going to the planning council,
Pretty
listen to this,
capitalistic.
everything in Sarasota, everything they've done from Sarasota coming this way, all the new development, they require green space, they require recreation. It's not a matter if they want to do it or not. They're told this is what you're going to put in your development. You put this portion in there, X amount of your development's going to require X amount of square footage of recreation and whatever the case may be. So if we're not doing that, that's something we definitely need to get on board with, for sure.
It's in here.
We are, it's
Yes.
in here, our green spaces, but I want to make sure that it is not just providing open space,
Yeah.
but it's providing
Oh, it's
recreational
that's right.
opportunities.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
They're
not,
very specific with
yeah,
that.
it's not saying, all right, we're just going to put in a pavilion and call it a park.
Right.
We need a play set, we need baseball fields, we need things like that. So not just that open space, but actually give something and provide it there.
Actually specific to playground equipment. When they start the discussion, every bit of that's actually laid out in there. So that's something.
You said that was Sarasota?
Sarasota,
big
King
time
Ranch,
one.
King Ranch was building a lot of it. They went as far as making them build their own interchange. Get on 75, get off 75, they had to build all that themselves. All their arterial roads inside had to be built by them. There's
Charlotte's got the same
a
thing,
lot to it.
right?
Well, yeah, Sarasota, Charlotte, coming through the whole development there, so.
And Commissioner, that includes utilities and service as well.
It does as well, yes.
Yes.
They have to
those-
bring it,
the
they
whole
have to bring it
project.
to the road,
Right.
then they hook in. And they usually have to pay a hookup.
They just had to get
They
permission to
may
tap in.
require to
and
put in
they
lift
had-
stations, bring it out with lift stations and then go from there.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
Shane, concurrency requirements were, as far as the water and sewer and things like that, we have those requirements. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna dig into the recreational piece of it, and I'll send you, I'll put together a report of what we have and what we're proposing, and if I could just get some feedback on how to strengthen it or direct it in a way, steer it in a way that you guys feel is appropriate, I'd absolutely love that. And
Got a
find
meeting
way to make it
Thursday,
work.
and I'll get some information from you while I'm there. It's a meeting I was trying to give away, but I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. So I got it.
Let me ask one other question, Ryan. So you had kickback on 30% of open space as it related to commercial. But what does a Charlotte County or what does a Lee County do? They require? This was an argument that I made, I don't know how long ago. I know Don Davis was still on the board, and I remember saying if I wanted to take Quality Electric and butt up to the county building, if I wanted to increase my square footage, go vertical, increase the tax base, and have climate controlled storage or whatever I wanted to do, couldn't do it because of setbacks. I could come in and ask for a special exception, but it was heavily frowned upon, was what was told to me internally. And I just thought, man, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot because who's going to build anything next to the county barn, right? Like,
Right.
And that's a laydown yard for me. That's really an eyesore, Now Doyle having it his way, we're going to build a beautiful brick fence. We're probably going to put up a wrought iron gate, and doesn't make my ulcer bleed anymore at all. whereas, you know, we could do something differently. The point I'm making, though, is why, you know, I would love to see what the standard of the industry is on that as well as it relates to commercial also, because I know how much I travel in Miami and I go to their industrial or I go to their
Lot line to lot line.
lot line on top of, looks horrendous, but it's centrally located. You know what I mean? It's clustered. And
There's
I think
a
that's
place for it.
Yes,
Your
sir.
place is set
Yeah.
for it.
You know what I mean? You know, and so if Mr. McLeod sells out, Raymond, across the street from me, and they put in 12 homes there, and they have a little gated community or whatever it is that comes in because we get sewer in the ground and they can increase the density and the lots become all that, right? Okay, they have to take that into consideration that me and Bob Dean Supply are catty corner from each other, and then you move over and you got J&J and all that stuff, kind of a little bit of an industrial field complex there. But we have to be mindful of, now we have residences that are coming up as well. And I just look at those things like that and say, you know, I don't want to have that corridor that starts to look horrible and it can get away from you just that quick. You know, I mean, some of the offers that have been made on our building would have been a very good investment for us. But the people, I don't want to sell it to them because I know what they want to do, and it's not going to be productive to Hendry County. You know, so anyway, that's just show us that, boss. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's one of the LDC amendments as well for that industrial, is defining an industrial park and looking at those open space requirements and things that go along with that within a park, and like you're saying, an appropriate place for it. So I'll include that as well. All right. I think we are rolling up on the end of our time, but we didn't, there's no changes to Pioneer. That's the way that it was before.
Ryan, you know the genesis of why you got in bad trouble in Pioneer, right?
No, sir.
Vince Catero, Sarah Catala, probably 2 or 3 meetings apiece with them, Margaret Emblich, 2 or 3 meetings with her, and now here you come, putting the same thing on the wall. Hey, I want to know what y'all's thoughts, opinions are, and all that. People wore out with it, boss. They're wore out with it. They just want to see something, and then this is our community. Leave us the heck alone. I you know, this rural legacy, I think is us hearing our constituents. I really do. I think that us knowing that we're going to leave Felda, Flaghole, Pioneer, you know, we're going to leave those places alone because that's the way they've been. I think that's what it has to be, you know, so sorry for cutting you off.
And that was one of the concerns that came up at that meeting as well, was change and how it's going to impact them. This is the Everglades Airport overlay. This is something we'll be working on as part of our transportation element update, and I'll be coming back with you guys to explain each category and how it's going to be set up, and just working with the airport and the plans, the potential plans that we have for it, and as it grows, and making sure we have those transitional areas so we have appropriate places for industrial parks or industrial uses, as well as those residential uses within that area. Montura, nothing changed, but we did add an overlay so it's easy to reference where our village center is, and the County Road 833 overlay. Those have additional allowances for commercial uses within those areas. So we just showed it on the map so it's a little bit easier to reference. Harlem and Hooker's Point. I'd hit a little bit on Harlem, and we've made some allowances for Harlem. I've been working with Commissioner Byrd, as well as having those public spaces is called out within there. And then over to the Hooker's Point area, we have kind of, we had a mix of uses within that node right there. So we just turned it into a mixed use center and expanded it to include all the commercial and industrial uses that are there right now, as well as any properties that are slated for that kind of development. We changed the cemetery to public up in the top there. And then other than that, it was just name changes for the rest of it.
Wait, help me now. Where's the industrial in Harlem?
So, no, not Harlem, Hooker's Point, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the mixed use center, that purple center right in the middle of Hooker's Point, which is kind of a mix of different uses, and it just kind of had a splattering. So we turned that into a mixed use center to allow for those uses within there.
So in Harlem, I don't see, unless I'm just overlooking it.
Okay.
Am I not noticing that the Harlem Academy Library and Harlem Academy is not listed, nor
Is that the little blue box on 10th?
That's
not, is
No,
that
so,
the
so
gym?
we, the proposed uses for the Harlem Academy and some of the things we're building up towards, we didn't want to leave it as public because that would restrict some of those uses within there. But I will look at the library.
Okay, but, and then the park adjacent to
Or-
Harlem Academy doesn't need to be listed as in public, or no?
Or maybe that.
You're talking about the U.S. Sugar Park right there above the.
No, so right beside the Civic Center,
I don't
catty
see it.
corner to the Civic Center, there's the
Because far
park
left is the-
that
the far
runs
left is
all
the
along that
top
road.
box is
Okay.
the cemetery.
talking
Till you get to
here.
10th
I
Street
think it would be there.
Oh,
or
okay,
Kentucky. Is that-
Pool,
That's, you're talking about the one on
and the
Florida,
gym is right here.
right by the Harlem
Yeah,
Academy,
we're
Correct.
by the,
Yellow
by the,
urban.
Right,
by the-
shouldn't that be highlighted blue?
It should be, right,
It
Ms.
should
Bird?
be.
because that
Okay.
is public.
And the
but
ball
it's
field.
It's
county,
all
right.
yellow, right?
Yeah.
There should be a tremendous amount of more blue, Ryan.
Baseball
Okay,
field.
I'll look
Baseball,
into-
tennis courts.
It used to be called, it still is Young Man Progressive Park. That's the one he's talking about.
And then
Okay.
Tommy,
Ms.
you
Bird,
need
is
to
that
give
the
him a
one that has
listing
the
of the
roll-up
parks.
doors?
It's not
So
this.
across from the gym?
It's not that, right?
It's right. like
No,
across
so that's
way
the
from,
Civic
like, when you
Center.
first come
Right.
in.
This is the
Across from Harlem
Janet
Academy.
Taylor Tree
Yeah,
Park.
Yep.
Not the daycare, but the
Yes,
Harlem
ma'am.
I don't know
Academy.
what happened there.
It's Harlem
All-
Garden.
So this
Yep.
is,
Tommy will give him a listing of all the parks as well, and then that'll take care of all of that.
And then the cemeteries are listed as public as well?
yeah.
That's this
see,
big blue box?
This area here should be blue. That's all that park.
Okay, I'm with you.
That's
Yes,
one.
sir.
Yep.
This was one.
Right. I'll get into Harlem a little bit more and make sure we have everything set
And then
aside.
I think too, I think also you're gonna see, Ryan, in Harlem, you have a commercial,
On Harlem Academy.
Yes,
He-
ma'am.
He is aware of that.
Yeah.
So that's where we made those additional allowances within the urban mixed-use category.
Yep.
We also didn't want to restrict those commercial uses to just that street. So I expanded it to where it's allowed throughout Harlem. There are some locational standards, like being on a street corner, that it has to meet.